Hey.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome back, Misfits, and welcome back to a new episode. Today, we are continuing the Holiday 411 series with another late holiday.
Woo, we're on a roll.
Yes.
I mean, we just want to give y'all good stuff. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think about them a little late.
Yes.
But we think about them and we want to deliver.
Yeah, the thoughts happen. And the way that this happened, because you need context, right? This is
you
going
need to
on,
understand
this is going
behind
on
the
way too
scenes.
long.
Okay?
Yeah, behind the scenes of planning for this holiday series. We planned for this holiday series back in
Months
October
ago.
of last year.
Yeah.
And we were like, this is a cool idea. It had already, like, the holidays had already started.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, we'll do it next year, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then
we even put like reminders and like, we got this, we're doing this.
It's great. But then when we made the original list, we didn't think about all these other holidays because we know about them, right? But we don't celebrate them. And so we
were just thinking of the
minds.
Bigger ones that were like off the top of our head, kind of.
Right. And so this is another episode that's going live after the holiday has already happened.
Yeah.
But it still needs
just
to
so
be
you know,
talked
like,
about.
hey, it happened. What's it all about?
Yeah, and hey,
and that's what
some
we're here
of
for.
you listening, you may not even know it that it happened,
Yeah,
right? Maybe you don't have a Hispanic background. Maybe you don't know Hispanic people. Some, I don't know. Maybe you just don't know.
True.
But
we're here to
solve your problems.
inform
Yes.
and bring you the good stuff.
Yes.
Like this holidays episode. Yeah.
Exactly. So having said that, today we're going to talk about Three Kings Day. Three Kings Day is also known as Epiphany, Feast of the Epiphany, or Theophany. It is celebrated on January 6th, mostly in Europe, Spain, and Latin America. This holiday marks the glorification of Jesus by the three wise men, Melchor, Gaspar, and Baltasar. I don't know how to say those with like an American accent, so that's what you get. I don't
either.
right now.
I was thinking that when I was reading them, and I was like, how do you say these in English? Because I've only heard them in Spanish.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So from two Hispanic girls,
exactly.
This is all we got.
That's what you get. So the word epiphany comes from the Greek epiphania, which means manifestation. This holiday commemorates the first manifestation of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles, represented by the three kings, the manifestation of his divinity as it occurred at his baptism in the Jordan River, and at his first miracle at Cana in Galilee. And now to the Bible. So we see the story of the wise men in Matthew 2, where the wise men were led by the star to meet Jesus. When they meet him, they bring him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which is probably vaguely what a lot of people know, right? Because they kind of know what the wise men brought him. From this story in the Bible is where this holiday comes from. So this is the origin. Children around the world receive presents to remember the wise men who brought gifts to Jesus upon meeting him. Now, there's a lot more in the story of Matthew 2, so definitely go read that because there's Herod and there's...
Yeah, a lot of other things that were going on around this event. Yeah.
Yes, so it's very interesting. Just go read that for yourself.
If you want to, learn the beginnings of Jesus and what was going on around that. It's a good read.
Yes, exactly. And in this part of the Bible also, because there's a lot of beef when it comes to the nativity scene how the wise men are at the birth of Jesus, which is not biblically correct.
Right.
They go to him when I think I read somewhere that he was probably like a toddler, maybe like 2 years old at that point or something. But you can clear that up if you read Matthew 2.
Yeah. You kind of see like the timeline sort of kind of when they saw the star and then obviously reaching Jesus.
Yeah. And then you can pick your camp if you're magi at the baby scene or not.
But listen, it's all good. Like we're celebrating Jesus is what's important.
Yes. When he was born 2 years later, doesn't matter. He was being celebrated. But now to the teachiness. So it's interesting to note that Three Kings Day actually originated out of Epiphany, like we had mentioned. The Western Church commemorated the visit of the Magi, aka the Three Kings, while the Eastern Church celebrated primarily the baptism of Jesus and the revelation that Christ was both fully God and fully man. After time, they've started merging, basically, and then it became the holiday that we know now. So although Christmas is celebrated in Spain, Mexico, and other Latin American countries, Santa Claus isn't as popular there as he is in the United States. Rather, the more popular holiday is Three Kings Day.
We also mentioned the three kings' names. In Matthew, there's actually no names, right? It doesn't mention the names. So in Western tradition, they identify them, or like the reason they name them is Caspar is king of India, and then Melchor as king of Persia, and Baltasar as king of Arabia. So that's kind of like just in the history and the tradition, that's kind of what these three represent.
Yeah, but they're not actually in the Bible.
But they're not actually in the Bible.
Yeah.
And even the number of the kings or the magi is not in the Bible. Like, it doesn't say there were 3 of them. The reason we note that is because there were 3 gifts. So just in kind of like in relation to that, it's just easier to kind of associate. Yeah, there's 3 gifts, so there's 3 people. Yeah, and those were the gifts, right, to Jesus.
Because that's the other like disagreement or whatever, where they were like, maybe there was more than 3. And there could possibly have more than 3.
Absolutely.
Maybe those were really big treasure chests. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
they
weren't like
gold is heavy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't like that little treasure chest that they're just holding in their hands or whatever. It was like a cofre or
like a little
like
coin purse or something. Here's some gold.
Maybe they had like big donkeys carrying all the stuff or whatever. But there may have been more. We don't know.
Yeah, so it's plural, so all we can assume is there's more than like 2 or more. Yeah, more than 1, basically. So as we mentioned, they brought gifts, and these were meant to be symbolic, right? They have gold, which was associated with the belief that Jesus was the King of the Jews. Frankincense, which is often burned in churches today. It was meant to represent the divine nature of Jesus and the fact that people would come to worship him as the Son of God. And myrrh, which is a perfume sometimes used to embalm dead bodies. It represented the fact that Jesus would eventually suffer and die. So this is a representation of those 3 gifts. Three Kings Day remains an important holiday for Catholics. In addition to the gift giving, there's also a culinary treat, which is popular in Mexico, and that's specific to this holiday, which is known as Rosca de Reyes, or King's Cake. And this holiday dessert is shaped in a circle to signify a king's crown. This sweet bread holds a special surprise. So inside is this little small figurine that represents baby Jesus. And so when you cut it up, whoever finds this token isn't obligated to host a party, an upcoming party for the occasion. That's Dia de la Candelaria, which is Candlemas Day, which is on February 2nd. It's kind of the result of you finding the baby Jesus in the street.
Right. And 2 things, like, isn't there another cake that's like that in like Louisiana and New Orleans and
Mardi Gras?
Yeah. That they have some sort of cake that does that too.
So that's kind of associated with like Easter or the beginning of that time period.
Yeah.
And we'll maybe talk about that because obviously Easter is another holiday, which we'll talk about later on.
That one is on the list. And that one will
hopefully
come
it will
out
be on time. Keep us accountable.
Yep. And then this Candlemas Day, I hadn't heard of that. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, I hadn't either. Yeah. And as far as like, I know, like, I hear stories from my parents of how they celebrated this holiday or at least knew about it or whatever. I haven't heard about this other one.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with much about it either.
No. It might come back in a different episode or something. Or, we're just adding.
Like, now we know.
More holidays
now we know.
Yeah. But, I didn't know about that.
So if y'all know, that's cool because we don't.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know where this tradition came from as far as the cake and this whole, like, you're next. But apparently kids are told to leave their shoes filled with food, quote unquote, for the camels by their bedroom door. And that is, like, when the wise men come, they'll leave their gifts. And so this food is meant for the camels, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Because in ours was different. Like, in Puerto Rico, when we used to celebrate, we used to do shoe boxes. And we used to fill them with grass and then leave them under a tree. And it was the equivalent of like the cookies for Santa situation. And so, the camels eat the grass and then the magi leave you presents. And, your parents do the whole extra thing where they grab some grass and they throw it on the floor as if the camels had eaten it and stuff.
Some behind.
And then I read where we were preparing for this episode, how some kids do the shoebox with the grass and everything, but they leave it under their bed. But I've never heard of this whole fill your shoes with stuff and then they leave the presents by the shoes. Like, I tried to find where that came from or something. Like,
so maybe it's more like European.
I don't know.
Because as far as like what we're familiar with, that's not something I remember.
Like I'm just curious, like symbolically, like what does that mean? Because it's shoes, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, like what do the shoes have to do with anything?
And if anyone knows, let us know.
That makes me think of like stocking shoes. Like,
there
some
that's what I kept seeing. It was the equivalent of the stocking used in shoes, I guess.
That's interesting. But you're leaving it for versus a stocking is like, well, they leave you gifts.
Yeah.
That's a puzzler.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Yeah. Gifts by the shoes.
It is also interesting to mention that many around the world celebrate like a variation of this holiday. So places like England, Egypt, Italy, even the Middle East all have this holiday in maybe some
form or
variation.
fashion,
Yeah.
Which
that
is
they
interesting
also-
because I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
I was like, the Middle East. It said somewhere like Jordan or something. I was like, Jordan is celebrating the three kings. I was like, all right.
All right. Do y'all have treats too? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? Like what's the gift situation there?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Where do you put the
Yeah,
shoes? You
Apparently
know?
it's very well known. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty broad. So anyway, this was a very interesting holiday, very different, but very close to Christmas and the whole what that represents as well.
Yeah,
So,
which is great because it ties in specifically for us just because we're Hispanic and we've celebrated in the past, and I celebrated when I was a kid, and I know what it is, and I'm just like, this one's
Yeah.
cool. This one I know what it is. We hope that you enjoyed learning about Three Kings Day or the Magi. Those names are, interchangeable in this episode, just so you know.
Yeah.
But we hope that you learned something today. And as always, this is Fran.
this is Yadi.
We are the Midtown Misfits, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.